I'm back in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan after leaving my previous trip here early because it didn't go as planned. I'm hoping to reach the lake I couldn't make it to before and camp for 2 nights in the remote winter wonderland of the McCormick Wilderness. These are situations right here to look out for, where there are streams under the snow, and actually even right here along the trail. Looks like a path here this time. Last time this was completely water. There were a couple logs, I think, right here, if I remember correctly. Because I knew there would be a creek crossing this time, I did bring an extra pair of shoes in case my feet got wet. This is pretty solid right here. So something with some decent sized tracks. Went up this way, or came from that way. Can't really tell. They don't look like they're that fresh though.
What are you doing out here right now?
Alright. About to get a move on. Looks like a big stash of firewood right here that someone left. So this is the area that I camped at last time I was here. I stopped and camped because this creek looked harder to cross than the last one, but looks like it has frozen over quite a bit. And there's some tracks from some other people that have gone this way. Just stepped here, went through. Okay, so I've officially made it further than last time. So now I don't know what the trail is like up ahead, but pretty sure there aren't any more creek crossings. So I have to pull my sled through this. After about 100 water crossings, I made it to the campsite. I don't really think it gets much better than this, to be honest. It's beautiful. So I actually changed where I decided to set up my tent, just because for two reasons. One, there's a little bit more snow. I went ahead and kicked as much snow as I could around the bottom edge of the tent. And the second reason is the actual tent spot is kind of exposed and it's starting to get slightly windy, so this is back a little bit more. Very first thing I'm doing is getting my sleeping bags out so they can fluff. I think this looks good. I brought this compressed hardwood so that I could burn it with whatever firewood I collect. My CO2 monitor says that it's 45 degrees, but I feel like it's warmer than that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and get dinner started because that will take some time to finish cooking. So I'm making something relatively simple. I'm making beef stew. I brown the meat and then put some onions in and some flour. I'm gonna add some red wine to this. Also added beef broth powder, a couple of bay leaves, I do have this thermos of hot water, so I'm gonna make some hot chocolate. Just because the food's gonna take a long time. I still need to go out and do firewood, but I'm gonna have some hot chocolate first, and then I'll get to the firewood. I made this hot chocolate mix, and it's just powdered cream, powdered cocoa, some brown sugar, and I think I actually put some, like some crushed peppermint candies in this. The nice thing about making your own hot chocolate mix is that you can control how sweet it is, because like Swiss Miss and all that stuff is just literally way too sweet. This is really good with the crushed peppermint. Forgot to mention that the last few ingredients, carrots, potatoes, green beans, and believe it or not, ketchup. I just think it adds a really good flavor. And it probably sounds crazy, but it does. Accidentally touched my liner to the stove. It's about time to go to bed. So I just woke up, actually slept really well, and was super quiet. Like literally didn't hear anything last night. It was really, did get a little bit windy though. Coffee is what's motivating me to get up right now. So I'm gonna make a fire, make some coffee, and then I got a lot more firewood to process today. Okay, so now that I've got coffee, I am gonna make breakfast soon. I got these overnight oats, but you can heat them up also, so it's just oatmeal with flax, chia, and hemp. And so I'm gonna make some apple cinnamon oatmeal and some local Upper Peninsula Michigan bacon. I literally can't remember. I'll put the brand somewhere. I've never had it before, so we'll see how it is. Got it in Marquette, so. I'm sauteing some apples with butter and cinnamon and sugar to go into my oatmeal. That cinnamon and sugar smells so good right now. Cooking really warms up the tent. It's actually really good for oatmeal. Oatmeal is not my favorite breakfast, but This actually came out really good. Good bacon. Really good bacon, actually. So a few weeks ago, I decided that I was going to do a 3-night trip here in the McCormick Wilderness. And it was my first winter camp of the season. I drove up here, there was a winter storm coming, and there was a lot of snowfall expected. So when I first got to the McCormick Wilderness, the snow was pretty compact, it hadn't snowed much yet, and I got out on the trail really optimistic. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, but I soon realized how challenging it was, even with compacted snow, to pull the sled and get to the site that I intended. It was just a lot more slow going. I really only had a few hours of daylight because it gets dark around 5 o'clock around this time of year, and I think I got on trail around 3. Along the way, I also didn't realize that there were creek crossings, so I was really surprised when I saw open water. And one of the scarier things that happened on the trip was when I walked down to the creek to assess the depth to try and figure out if it was something I could cross or not, my sled came tumbling from behind me and hit the back of my legs and pushed me into the creek. So I've got to somehow cross this creek. It could have been worse. Thankfully, I didn't fall all the way in the creek. And the boots I was wearing were supposed to be waterproof. Thank God they were. So because I didn't get wet, I decided to continue on to my campsite. I inevitably made it to another creek crossing. Looks like I'm coming up to another water crossing here, which that might be a sign that we're gonna have to just find camp. But by this time it was around like 4 o'clock, and I just didn't think it was a good idea to continue on to where I planned to go. So I just found a flattish area and ended up setting up camp by the creek that I didn't end up crossing. It got dark. I didn't have time to look for firewood, so I just ended up doing a cold camp. If you've been watching my channel, you know I really like cooking out here. I ended up eating an emergency Mountain House lasagna backpacking meal, which a lot of people have suggested I do anyway, but I'll tell you that that meal was not that good. It was edible, but it literally reminded me of like Chef Boyardee canned ravioli. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't look very good. I mean, it's okay. Definitely does remind me of Chef Boyardee ravioli. Anyhow, I was happy that I at least had something hot to eat. I used water that I had brought with me in a thermos. So woke up the next morning and my tent was totally covered in snow. And it was then that I realized that I had made the mistake the night before when shoveling out my site of just tossing my shovel somewhere, not thinking about all of the snow and my gear getting buried. So I lost my shovel in the snow. And I also realized in that moment that my GoPro was gone and had probably fallen out of my sled somewhere along the trail. So I had just pretty much given up on the idea of finding my GoPro, but it did take me roughly an hour plus to find the shovel that I had lost. I ended up having to dig around all around my campsite using my snowshoes. But the one thing that I realized after finding my shovel was that I was not in control of my situation on that trip. I was making a lot of mistakes. I was unsure of myself, and I just didn't feel very comfortable. So I knew in that moment that I shouldn't be out there. So I decided that I would pack up my gear and head back to the car, regroup, and plan another trip if I wanted to come back. It is always really challenging to leave a trip early and not do what I set out to do for multiple reasons, because a lot of planning and taking time off work, etc., goes into these trips. And so if I leave early or I cancel a trip, I might not be able to get back out on the trip for a while. But even with that being said, sometimes it still is the right thing to do. And in this case, it was the right thing to do. So when I went to leave to pull my gear, I realized that I couldn't pull my sled anymore. Because of all of the fresh snowfall, it was virtually impossible to pull my sled back to the car. Even though I was able to get it to the campsite, the fresh snowfall just added so much resistance that it basically made it impossible. So I realized I was going to have to make 2 trips. So it was around 11 o'clock when I got started. Didn't end up finishing and getting back to my car with all of my gear until almost 7 p.m. So that's how long it took me. Probably one of the most physically challenging things I have done while backcountry camping. But I got back to my car and I was safe. So, and then fast forward to my last trip where I decided to go to a place for one night that I'm familiar with and I know, but the temperatures were pretty extreme on that trip and I couldn't figure out my hot tent stove. Thankfully on both trips, I knew to prepare for not being able to use the stove. And I just know you can run into issues and you never want to 100% rely on them. So I did have the proper sleep setup to where I slept relatively warm on both camps. All that being said, I decided to come back to the McCormick Wilderness because I left that trip early. I've been wanting to see this Lower Baraga Lake campsite ever since, and it's actually been a really good, comfortable trip so far. And the area is gorgeous, and Lower Baraga Lake was well worth the trip back here. So definitely bumped my head a couple times to get to this point, for sure. But that's what it's all about.
So yeah, just wanted to explain what happened before.
And then also wanted to explore around the lake while I'm out here. Just because I put in a lot of work to get to Lower Baraga Lake and I'd love to see the whole thing. They're covered up now, but I'm pretty sure the tracks that were coming in, the snowshoe tracks on my way in, were from somebody ice fishing because the tracks did go out across the lake. So at some point, the ice must have been good. Definitely not good right now. More animal tracks here. Ice expands, so the trail around the lake is flooded right now. If it doesn't clear up, I might turn back if it's seeming like there are just too many opportunities for me to step in water. No reason to risk anything. There is a lot of animal activity in this area. Just constantly see tracks. This must be a trail right here. Okay, so I don't think that trail was the right way to go, or I don't even know if that was actually a trail. According to the map, the trail stays along the lake here, but I don't know. It's not looking too safe, if I'm being honest. I'm gonna go ahead and head back to camp, thinking that's the best plan. Are those from me? I think so. I just don't remember touching all the way over here. Maybe. Yay, my nice cozy shelter. All of these trees are extremely dense. The rings are really, really small, so they're extremely hard to chop open with my axe. Probably doing this wrong also. I have a feeling that if I put this in the video, I'm gonna get a few comments about what I probably should have been doing, which I welcome if it's gonna make my life easier next time. Reheating up these leftovers for dinner. I thought about making a second meal, but I've got leftovers, so I guess there's really no point. Having the last of the peppermint hot chocolate before I go to bed. It's about 6 a.m. I've got to leave here at 8:30. That's the sunrise time. So I just wanted to get up with enough time to make some coffee, pack up, and get out of here as soon as I can. It's been snowing all morning. So I'll have a long trek back to the car. Hopefully it's not too bad though. All right, so I am heading away from the campsite, and it's actually not snowing right now, thank goodness. So hopefully the trek back isn't too challenging. Here I am again at the end of a trip. It's really nice to have come full circle and to be back at the McCormick Wilderness again. Honestly, this is the hot tent trip that I had been going for all along. It just took me a few times to get to this point and get ready for this 8-hour drive back to Detroit. So thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next trip.